Hey everyone, my name is Azure O'Neil. I'm Overland Expo's Director of Logistics. Thank you for checking out this video today. I've spent about 7 years traveling around the world, both by 4 and 2 wheels. But before we get too far into that, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I grew up in Vermont and went to school in Washington, D.C. for anthropology and psychology. I wound up spending several years there afterwards working in the events industry. And I can definitely say that I much prefer planning events that take place in fields and forests to events that take place in hotel ballrooms and the White House. But back in 2011 in DC, I was just feeling like I needed a change. So I moved to Australia to learn how to make wine. And I was traveling there afterwards when I met a Dutch guy named Roel who had ridden his motorcycle overland from Holland to Australia. He invited me to jump on the back of his bike and take a trip down the middle of the country. And we wound up spending the next 3 years traveling around Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, largely by 4 wheels. But the part of my journey I'd like to tell you about actually took place on 2 wheels through Central and South America after I learned how to ride my own motorcycle around North America. So, like many of you, I have had a lot of time to reflect during this lockdown. And I've been thinking a lot about how my experiences while traveling relate to the current situation. And while quarantining couldn't feel more different from riding 90,000 miles around the Americas, the experiences and perspective I gained through that journey have really helped carry me through this one. And it's pretty simple. In any crisis, no matter how large or small, I look for the silver linings. And if there's not one immediately apparent, I'll imagine one. Like for example, if I get stuck in traffic, I'll think maybe I'm stuck in traffic and because of that, I wasn't in the accident that happened, but I was one of the first on the scene. Something like that. And it helps me. So I'm going to preface the rest of my time with you today with a little side note. Everyone knows the saying that it's not an adventure until something goes wrong. But none of us actually want anything to go wrong, do we? We spend an extraordinary amount of time route planning before we go, reading every product review for every product we could possibly take with us. And in reality, it's why I have a job. Because everyone wants to come to Overland Expo to learn what to do, what not to do, what to buy, and how to use it. We're obsessed. And there's a huge part of being a responsible traveler that necessitates this type of training and preparation. But the reality is that no matter what we do, things go wrong in life. Because the amount of control we desire has relatively low correlation with the amount of control we can actually exert over the events in our life. And besides, we're all doing this to have an adventure anyway, right? So basically, I'm telling you that everything I'm showing you and about to tell you about is totally fine because I had an adventure and I survived largely intact. Pretty much. Anyway, back to the story. So Roel and I had ridden a fair bit around the US and Canada. And this was our plan for Central and South America. This was about as specific as our planning got because we like to talk to the locals and let their advice guide where we would ride the next day. So our actual map wound up looking a lot like this. After we had ridden down the Baja Peninsula, we crossed over to the mainland and we received a message on Facebook from a guy named Jose in Mexico City. He had ridden to the bottom of South America as we were about to do, and he just wanted to offer any advice or assistance he could while we were traveling in his country. So we made plans to catch up with him once we got to Mexico City. And he mentioned as an aside that his parents lived outside of Guanajuato, and if we needed anything, well, we were there to get in touch with him. But we didn't really think anything of it. We didn't even know at that point if we were planning to go there. So fast forward a couple of weeks, we are riding towards a city we had heard a lot about. We're excited, it's a beautiful day. We stop and get a new rear tire mounted on my bike. And as many of you know, you have to take it pretty easy for a little bit once you get a new tire because it can be slippery. So I'm being mindful of this and we're on the highway heading towards the city center. Roel and I start bickering over the headset. Like any couple, this is normal. But bickering soon leads to an all-out fight. And I decide to turn my headset off so I can focus on riding. Perhaps not the most intelligent decision given that Rule was the one who had the GPS, but I just figured I'll follow signs towards the city center and we'll meet up in the middle somewhere. This was going along as planned until I go through this tunnel and come out of it, and I'm temporarily blinded by the setting sun. And I realize just too late that I need to be in the left lane, and I'm in the right lane. And between the left and the right lane is a line of topes. And anyone who's ever been to Mexico just cringed when I said that word. Because topes are essentially a traffic construction meant to be like a speed bump, but they're like halved bowling balls that are placed in the middle of the road to wreak havoc. So I was very concerned about, getting lost, losing track of Rule, and just having kind of a disaster of an afternoon. So I made the split-second decision to try to gas it over the topes. Well, my new rear tire and I had clearly not yet bonded, and he was not on board with this message, and decided to just slide along the topes until I crashed very hard. So picture this, the highway V's like this. My motorcycle is crashed in the left lane over here, and it's like a yard sale. All sorts of bits and pieces are all over the highway. My panniers have broken off. So Rule and I are frantically collecting things from the road and collecting it in the middle. And soon enough, highway traffic is whizzing by on the left side. But on the right-hand side, nothing's moving. And I realize this and look, and I'm pretty in shock. But there's this woman in a green pickup truck, and she's shouting at me, "Are you okay? Can I help you? Do you need to go to the hospital?" And she keeps saying something about her husband, but my Spanish probably wasn't quite good enough yet at that point to fully grasp it. But I'm just telling her, no, it's okay, go ahead, please continue. And soon enough, traffic is whizzing by on both sides. Rule gets my bike up and running again. He secures my panniers back to the motorcycle with ratchet straps. And we ride into one of the most beautiful, historic, romantic, and expensive cities in all of Mexico at dark, and find the least expensive hotel we can, which is still 4 times our travel budget. So I'm sitting there, I'm sore, I have wicked whiplash. Rule is not pleased with me or the state of my motorcycle, which he says he cannot fix with the tools that we have. And I'm feeling pretty low and broken. I'm wondering how long it's going to be until I can think clearly enough to ride, until I can even move my neck properly. And mind you, this is country number 1 of 19 in Central and South America that I'll be riding through. So this is not a very good start. Somehow through the haze, I remember Jose's offer about his parents living near Guanajuato. So I reach out to him, and within minutes, Jose Sr. calls me, gives me his address, tells me that they have all of the tools we could possibly need to work on my bike, and they have a spare bedroom that we are welcome to until I feel well enough to ride again. And before he ends the call, he says, "Oh, by the way, do you remember the woman in the green pickup truck this afternoon?" That was my wife. And it still obviously makes me emotional to this day, because in a city of 170,000 people, probably more, Jose's wife, who was retired, was driving on a highway into the city and just happened to be behind my motorcycle when I crashed. So what ensued was 3 days of us being thoroughly well looked after. Jose and Laura were retired bakers, so we ate super well. It actually turned out that Jose Jr. and Sr. had our exact same motorcycles at one time, a Honda Africa Twin and a Transalp. And so we just spent a lot of time getting both of the bikes in really good mechanical shape. And they took us to some incredible local sites that we otherwise would never have seen because they weren't in guidebooks or written about online. We spent 3 months all together in Mexico, and some of my dearest friends to this day are people we met during that time. But the experience we had in Guanajuato remains my most cherished memory. We hear a lot about the kindness of strangers, especially during this time of COVID. There are a lot of really positive news stories about people going out of their way to help other people. But until this happened to me, and maybe this is the way I grew up, and maybe it's the same for some of you, I think I almost felt like asking for help or accepting charity somehow made me weak or less than. And this experience taught me that sometimes vulnerability can be a gift. And when we're at our lowest and most broken, and therefore forced to reach out for help, the charity we receive can not only make us whole again, it can make us better than we were to start with. We wound our way through Central America for another 4,000-ish miles and stopped in Panama City to visit Allison DeLapp, Overland Expo's Director of Operations. She had done a huge solo motorcycle trip around Central and South America, and she advised that we check out the Guajira Peninsula once we got to Colombia. The Wayuu people who live on the Guajira Peninsula are one of the only, if not the only, tribe never to be subjugated by the Spanish. They speak their own language, they maintain their very own specific set of customs. So of course the anthropologist in me was beside myself with excitement to spend some time getting to know them. But when we got to the Guajira, my excitement dried up pretty quickly. It was 1,000,000 degrees, and of course we're riding in full gear the whole time. Add to that, it seemed the Wayuu were bound and determined not to maintain their motorcycles. We had stopped something like 6 times that day to help people who were broken down on the side of the road, because that's what you do when you're a motorcyclist. You stop and you help people who are broken down. And you'd think this would be an opportunity to connect with these people, or at least that's what I thought. But unlike other people and places, it was almost like these Wayuu resented our help. Here we are giving away our spare gas, our precious chain lube, our dwindling water supply. And if we even got a nod before someone rode off into the distance, that was a lot. And of course, we weren't doing these things for thanks. And when interacting with different cultures, you can expect gratitude to be expressed in a way you recognize. And the Wayuu were extremely proud people to begin with. So it's not like that's what rankled. It was that I had been so excited to get to know them and to spend time with them, and they clearly could care less about me. So you could say my feelings were a little hurt, I guess. So needless to say, when at the hottest point of the day, we're riding along at 40 miles an hour on a badly corrugated dirt road, I was super not impressed when I saw 3 motorcycles stopped on the side of the road, clearly with a flat tire. There was, of course, no discussion that we would stop, but I distinctly recall complaining in the intercom to Rule, now we're not going to be able to set up camp before dark, and these guys are probably going to be just as annoyed with us as everyone else we've stopped for. But as soon as we pulled up alongside them, it was clear that they were far friendlier than anyone else we'd stopped for. They had actually already patched their own tire, so Rule was just pulling out the compressor to fill it up. So I'm literally just standing there kicking tires with these guys while he's doing that, and all of a sudden we hear this explosion. And we look, and my front tire has gone flat, like that. We're standing there slack-jawed, and I remember thinking to myself, what if we hadn't stopped for these guys? And my front tire had exploded like that while we were riding along at 40 miles an hour on these dirt corrugations, 3 hours away from the nearest hospital. So people categorize experiences like this in different ways. Some people might call it road karma, others maybe divine intervention, or simply luck. You're welcome to call it whatever you like. What I know is that our charity that day probably saved me from having my trip terminated, or worse. And with helping people, I think the reality is that we're doing something for them, and I think a lot of us feel this way, but we're the ones who really wind up feeling good about it. And after this experience, now I often think that I'm getting way more out of it than the person I'm helping. And it winds up leading to an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the opportunity to be of assistance. During this COVID pandemic, I think it's easy to feel helpless, but finding ways to help other people the best you can, even if that's just staying home and connecting with loved ones over the phone or somehow on Skype or the internet, can provide a great sense of purpose. But back to South America. So we traveled another 4,000-ish miles, and we were riding through the Lagunas route from Bolivia into Chile. It's about 370-ish miles of hell in the form of sand, loose gravel, corrugations, and high passes. And maybe some of you are a glutton for this type of punishment, and I guess I wound up being one too, because this route really provides some of the most spectacular scenery that all of South America has to offer. But it's really desolate. There are 2 so-called towns. They're really just a scattering of buildings and not a lot of traffic on the roads. So I was heading towards Mountain Pass and my bike starts to act up. And before I even get to the slope, I'm having major power issues and I'll suddenly have a complete failure. At the time, we were riding with a friend who was significantly more mechanically inclined than either of us, and David immediately suggested, why don't we check the air filter? Well, not to throw a rule under the bus, but he had been handling all of our maintenance and was adamant that there was no way the air filter could be clogged. So we set about checking everything else under the sun. We pulled out all of the tools, all of the spare parts. We checked and cleaned battery connections. We checked and replaced spark plugs. And let me tell you, the spark plugs on a 1989 Honda Trans Am are not the easiest to access. It was windy, it was cold, remote. We hadn't seen another vehicle in hours. And we're at 12,000 feet in the middle of nowhere. And I'm thinking to myself, this could be it. This could be the end of my journey with this motorcycle. She could be dead, like dead. Although we know she's a Honda, so technically I don't even know if that's possible. But in my mind, I was starting to consider plan B, which was rule towing me, and what a circus that would have been. And I was also considering plan C. And then David said, come on guys, why don't we just check the air filter? Sure enough, it was filthy. So we underestimated how much dust we'd collected since the last time we had done maintenance. And it took about 5 minutes and some of our spare fuel to clean the air filter and get us back on our way. Breakdowns are never fun. And while this was a particularly frustrating one, and there was definitely an inclination to dwell on the amount of time spent wasted on the side of the road, it really forced me to search hard for the silver linings. And I found them when I considered the wisdom and perspective I'd gained through the process. 1, work smart, not hard. Checking the air filter was literally a matter of removing a fairing and 3 screws. 2, I learned what it felt like for my bike to be starved for air. And anytime you're able to ride or drive a vehicle that is not operating at 100%, I'm of the opinion that it improves your relationship with that machine, your understanding of her operation, and therefore your safety. It improved my confidence. And when you're about to ride to the bottom of South America and back up to the top again, that's worth its weight in gold. Knowledge is truly power, but patience and flexibility are key tools as well. If you can slow things down, consider your options, and get really comfortable with going to plan B or C, there's a lot of freedom in that. In dealing with the unknown, the key to finding balance for me, both while traveling and during this pandemic, has been to get comfortable over and over again with the uncomfortable truth that I can control a lot less than I would like. I can do my best to educate myself and prepare for what may come, but there's a sweet spot where focusing on the things I can control and I'm grateful for, and letting go of the things I can't control helps to reduce my anxiety and free up my attention for more productive pursuits, like searching for silver linings. While I've probably always had a pretty positive outlook on life, like anyone, I've experienced hardships. I've taken my hits and gone through bouts of depression. But my experiences while traveling and learning that vulnerability can be a gift have ensured that I strive to find the good in any situation, especially in light of what our world is going through right now. Maybe you're stuck at home, but you're getting to spend a lot of extra special time with your kids or fur babies. Or if you're an essential worker and you have the opportunity to be out helping people or even saving lives, that's amazing, and thank you. There is always, always, always light in the darkness, even if that light has to come from our imagination from the time being. But right now is the perfect time to plan your next trip, to research routes and read all of the product reviews, and daydream of yourself being far, far, far away from wherever you are in quarantine. So in closing, I would like to wish everyone happy travels, for now from the comfort of your couch, and in the future when we can all get back out there and explore. I hope our paths cross then. Take care, everyone, and thanks for watching.